When you think of Theodore Roosevelt, you probably picture that serious face carved into Mount Rushmore, right? But the man himself was anything but stone-faced or static. He was a force of nature, a literal human hurricane who didn't just lead America, he basically grabbed it by the shoulders and shook it straight into the 20th century. So how did this guy become such a powerful force that he completely redefined the American presidency? Let's dive in.
And this quote? This isn't just some motivational poster slogan. This was Theodore Roosevelt's operating system. He lived by this idea of the strenuous life, the belief that you had to throw yourself into the ring, to go for it, to dare mighty things, win or lose. This was the code behind every single thing he did.
And that's really the most fascinating part of his story. The larger-than-life figure we all know wasn't born that way. He was built. It was a deliberate act of creation, really a total rebellion against the body he was born into.
So let's start at the very beginning, because his personal transformation is, and I'm not exaggerating, one of the most incredible stories of pure willpower you will ever hear.
Okay, just look at this contrast. On the left, that's young T.D., a sickly kid with crippling asthma, terrible eyesight, so fragile he was homeschooled. His father actually sat him down one day and said, "You have the mind, but you have not the body. You must make your body." And boy, did he take that to heart. Through just sheer grit, he forged himself into the man on the right, a competitive boxer, a rugged rancher out in the Dakota Badlands, and yeah, a decorated war hero. He literally willed a new version of himself into existence.
Now, his path to the presidency was not a straight line, not at all. In fact, it was a national tragedy that thrust him into the White House, and when he got there, he brought an energy that building had never seen before.
I mean, check out this timeline. It is an absolutely meteoric rise. We're talking 3 years to go from war hero leading the Rough Riders to governor of New York to vice president. And here's a great little fun fact. The powerful New York Republican bosses couldn't stand him as governor, so they pushed him into the vice presidency just to get him out of their hair. Well, the joke was on them. 6 months into the term, President William McKinley was assassinated, and just like that, at only 42 years old, Theodore Roosevelt became the youngest president in the history of the United States. As president, Roosevelt wasted no time making his mark, especially when it came to foreign policy. He had this very clear, very bold vision for America's place in the world.
And at the heart of that vision was this idea big stick diplomacy. Now, it wasn't just about being a bully. The idea was to build up America's strength, that's the big stick, our military might, so that you were strong enough that you could afford to speak softly. You project so much power that diplomacy alone is usually enough to get the job done.
And of course, this is the iconic line that gave the whole policy its name. So what did this look like in practice? How did he actually use it?
Well, he put it to work immediately. He was the driving force behind the Panama Canal, completely changing global trade forever. He issued the Roosevelt Corollary, which basically told European powers to stay out of Latin America because the U.S. would act as the region's policeman. And then, in a perfect speak softly moment, he used his influence to mediate a peace treaty between Russia and Japan, which actually won him the Nobel Peace Prize. He was, without a doubt, putting America on the map as a real global power.
But Roosevelt wasn't only focused on the world stage. He had a pretty radical vision for America itself, one where the government was an active force for good for its citizens. He called it the Square Deal. His whole domestic platform, the Square Deal, is pretty easy to remember with what he called the 3 C's. He just believed that every American, whether you were a farmer, a factory worker, or a business owner, deserved a fair or square deal from the government. So he focused on 1. Control of corporations, 2. Consumer protection, and 3. Conservation of our natural resources.
You have to remember, at that time, massive corporate monopolies, or trusts, controlled basically everything, from oil to sugar to railroads. Roosevelt was the first president to really stand up and challenge their power. He made the case that the government had a right to regulate big business to keep things fair, which earned him this very famous nickname, the Trust Buster.
But of all the things he did at home, his work in conservation is probably his most staggering, most lasting achievement. Just look at this number, 230 million. That's how many acres of public land he put under federal protection. To put that in perspective, that's an area roughly the size of Texas.
And this is what that number looks like broken down. Hundreds of national forests, bird reserves, and national parks. He was a passionate naturalist and an avid hunter, which is a fascinating paradox. It's what gave us the teddy bear story when he famously refused to shoot a tethered bear on a hunting trip. He saw America's wild spaces as a sacred trust for the future, and he used every ounce of his presidential power to protect them like no one had before. So, after all that, what do we make of this incredibly complex, larger-than-life person? Well, his legacy is just as vast and as complicated as the country he led.
It's just impossible to get a full picture of Roosevelt without looking at his contradictions head-on. The same guy who is a champion for conservation also pushed a very aggressive, imperialist foreign policy. The trustbuster who fought for the little guy held some deeply problematic racial views, even for his time. He was a product of his era, with all of its soaring progress and all of its deep-seated prejudices.
But his most enduring legacy might just be the presidency itself. Before Roosevelt, the office was often seen as a weaker branch of government. He's the one who turned it into what he called a bully pulpit, a platform to drive national conversations and push for change. The powerful, agenda-setting presidency that we expect today, that is, in so many ways, a Theodore Roosevelt invention.
So in the end, Roosevelt really defies any simple label. Was he a progressive reformer? Yes. An unapologetic imperialist? Also yes. A champion of nature and a warrior? He was that human hurricane. And wrestling with that complicated legacy isn't just about understanding the past, it's about understanding the very America he helped create, the one we are still living in today.